Europa has almost no craters, and that is the evidence. Europa is slightly smaller than our own moon. Its surface is the smoothest and brightest of any solid body we know, and the most striking thing about it is what is missing. Everything in the solar system gets hit. Over 4.5 billion years, craters accumulate, and a surface that has been sitting still that long is saturated with them. Our moon is. Callisto, another moon of Jupiter, is. Europa has almost none. Counting the few that exist gives a surface age in the tens of millions of years, which is very young, and crater counting is an estimate rather than a measurement. A surface that young has to be getting remade. Something is erasing the record. What covers Europa instead of craters is lines. Long dark bands and ridges run across it for thousands of kilometers, crossing and overlapping, and in places, the crust looks broken into slabs that have shifted and rotated and then frozen back together. That is the behavior of a thin, brittle shell floating on something that moves. Ice on the sea does exactly this. The confirming evidence came from magnetism. As Jupiter's enormous magnetic field sweeps past Europa, it induces a magnetic field in the moon, and the Galileo spacecraft measured it. To respond that way, Europa needs a layer near the surface that conducts electricity. Ice does not conduct. Salty liquid water does. So the argument runs: no craters, broken slabs, and a magnetic response that requires a conducting layer, not a photograph of an ocean. 3 separate pieces of evidence pointing the same way. The heat down there comes from being squeezed. Europa is 5 times further from the sun than we are. Sunlight there is about 1/25th of what falls on your window. It cannot keep an ocean liquid. Something else does. Europa goes around Jupiter every 3.5 days, and its orbit is not quite a circle because the neighboring moons keep tugging it into a slight ellipse. Being sometimes nearer and sometimes further from an enormous planet means the pull across the moon changes through every orbit. The whole body is stretched and released, twice each circuit. Bend a paperclip back and forth, and the metal gets warm. That is the same physics. Internal friction turns motion into heat, and a moon flexing under Jupiter has a great deal of motion to turn. The extreme demonstration is next door. Io, the innermost large moon, is squeezed harder than anything else in the solar system, and it is the most volcanically active body we know of, with hundreds of vents resurfacing it constantly. Same mechanism, more of it. On Europa, the heating is gentler, and the result is a shell of ice with liquid under it rather than a world of lava. Estimates of how much water are wide. The usual comparison is that Europa holds about twice as much liquid water as all of Earth's oceans put together in a body a quarter of Earth's diameter. The number depends on how thick the ice shell is, and the thickness has never been measured directly. Estimates run from a few kilometers to 30. That range is the honest state of it. Nobody knows why Enceladus is still warm. A body that small should have frozen solid long ago. Heat leaks out through the surface, and the smaller the world, the faster it leaks, because a small body has a lot of surface for the amount of interior it carries. Whatever heat Enceladus had when it formed is long gone. The heat coming out of the South Pole is being made now. Tidal flexing is the obvious answer, and it is almost certainly part of it. Enceladus is held in a slightly stretched orbit by a resonance with the larger moon Dione, in the same way Europa is held by its neighbors. But when the calculation is done for Enceladus at its present orbit, the heat it produces comes out too low by a wide margin to explain what Cassini measured. Several ideas fill the gap. The ice shell may flex more than a rigid shell would, especially if it is thin and the fractures at the pole are moving. The rocky core may be porous and soft, letting water circulate through it and dissipate energy inside. The orbit may have been more stretched in the past, and we may be seeing a warm episode that will end. They are all plausible. None of them is settled. This is a real open problem in planetary science, and it is worth naming that clearly, because a small moon that should be frozen and is not, is exactly the kind of fact that gets rounded off in the retelling.